Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goët.
More breaking news right now. We just got a federal court ruling on what you may have heard about, a so-called mystery case that many experts, including legal experts, have speculated is linked to the Mueller probe. What you have is basically a secret entity trying to defy something that is very hard to avoid in America, a grand jury subpoena. Now tonight, this brand new ruling, we just got it in, we just changed our rundown for it. We learned the grand jury seeking information from a corporation that is owned by country A, a foreign country. And this court tonight ruling that the feds have the authority to issue this subpoena and get the information they want. Now get this, you may have heard, in the Friday oral arguments on this case, the court staff locked down not just the courtroom, but the entire floor of the courthouse where lawyers were making their arguments. Let's get right to it. I'm joined by former Watergate prosecutor Nick Ackerman and attorney Julian Epstein with a lot of congressional experience, I should mention. Nick, there's a lot we don't know, which obviously can make this very interesting. But when you read the unusual secrecy around this, and tonight finally a ruling that says go forward and get information from a corporation owned by a country, what does it mean?
What it means to me is it's a bank. What they're trying to get are bank records from a foreign bank that is owned by the foreign country. So that would be a country like Russia, China, maybe Saudi Arabia. But what they're trying to do is to get banking records that are located outside of the United States. And there are a number of countries that own banks, but it seems to me what they're looking for is money flowing. That's what they're looking for.
Just to be clear, in a typical case, say someone is unhappy with a credit card issued by a foreign bank and they sue over it and they get into court. Would you lock down the whole courthouse for that? No.
This is for a grand jury. You're trying to maintain the grand jury secrecy, which is why you don't have any parties' names in the caption of this case. And normally, in any case where you're dealing with a grand jury situation where you have to talk about the facts of the case, the courtroom would be locked down. And keep in mind, if you look at this opinion, the three judges here actually received something from the government that was in secret that only they looked at, so they could see exactly what this investigation was about and why it was the government wanted those. And I think they're bank records. It's just got to be.
Julian Epstein, you're in Washington where people love a good mystery. We had individual one. Now we have country A. What is your analysis?
Yeah, like Murder on the Orient Express. It is a great mystery. I think Nick is right, and just so your viewers understand it, what the foreign-owned company was claiming was the Foreign Sovereign Immunities Act, which protects certain countries from being sued in certain circumstances, but not if you're a corporation engaged in commercial activities, and particularly not if you're engaged in criminal activities. So let's take a hypothetical if we're speculating here. Let's take China, which a lot of people have speculated about. The Bank of China is owned by the Chinese government. The Bank of China also happens to be one of Donald Trump's biggest financial backers, one of his largest tenants at Trump Tower. There's a lot of speculation about that. There's been a lot of speculation about Russian banks' relationships with Manafort, with lots of, at one point Donald Jr. said that they couldn't get any U.S. bank to back them financially in their private dealings, so they went to Russia to find financing. So the Saudis, as Nick says, people speculate about. The Turks obviously thought this White House was for sale, as we know, through Michael Flynn. So I think the likely countries that would be involved here would either be China, which is at the top of my list, Second would be Russia. Third would be the Saudi, exactly as Nick is saying. And then fourth, possibly Turkey.
And Nick, what do prosecutors, given that they're winning this step,
right,
what would they have to secretly prove to justify getting these records from this state-owned entity abroad?
I mean, I think they'd have to show the judges that, in fact, they have a good reason to ask for this information. They don't have to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. They simply have to have enough information so the judges feel comfortable that the information sought is relevant to their investigation.
They're not necessarily accusing this corporation of doing something illegal. They are saying this bank, which I agree with Nick as well, it's a bank. They are saying this corporate entity has information that is very relevant to the probe, if in fact this is Mueller. So
relevant to some criminal probe, be it Mueller or otherwise.
This is part of the house of cards that is tumbling.
Right. Well, and tumble it may as we look at this ruling. Julian Epstein and Nick Ackerman.
It is Wednesday, the 19th of December of 2018, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this priest? And while you're at it, would you bring that really nice, lovely egg dish with a really lovely hollandaise sauce on it, please? Please? Okay, well, look, we're always looking for a separation of church and something. And we may or may not get it, but at least, keeping it out in the open is good. That's why we do this on Wednesdays. Also, there's a deluge, a flood of news coming in, and part of our mission here is to parse it down and curate a tad. And that's what we're here for. Well, that was Ari Melber, Nick Ackerman, and crew breaking it down about that really mysterious grand jury court filing and case that they have been apparently arguing for several days at least. And they cleared out the courthouse, and we don't know who it is. But we basically know it is a foreign company that looks like is owned by a foreign government, and that kind of limits the pool of possibilities. I throw my lot into the Saudis. I think it could be the Saudis because I believe there's big news about to break about some Saudish involvement in all of this. But that may actually be a bit premature because I have been noticing international news about China being successful in election hacks in and around the world and also here in the United States. So we've got China, we got Russia, we do have Saudi Arabia. One bank, though, you know what? They're not owned by a nation. But I was thinking, what about Deutsche Bank? That wasn't necessarily in the list. So I'm curious about that. We do know that Deutsche Bank employed Anthony Kennedy's son, who just happened to be, they say, not responsible for Trump's portfolio, but somehow Trump mysteriously was able to get some loans through a bank that was laundering money for the Russians. So you just put two and two together, and I don't know. It smells, talks, wax like a duck. Okay, well, Trump's foundation got taken down, and we'll be speaking about that a little bit later here in the show because, look, everybody knows that was a criminal enterprise, and the only reason that they try to, make any other look like a criminal enterprise is they project so much. And it is all about projection at this point. Well, it's been about projection for quite a while. Projection is the Republicans, I believe it is a plank in their platform. Has been for decades, even way before Reagan. Mm-hmm. And, Boy, Flynn got shot down, didn't he? By a Reagan-appointed judge. So Trump's going to have a little hard time calling him an angry Democrat. Though we could call him an angry black man, and that probably is what he's saying in private. And they're trying to keep that one clamped down. He cannot stand, what he considers to be the help issuing edicts. But boy, boy, Sullivan just, jeez, he laid down the law, didn't he? There was a certain question about, where, how independent he is, because he tends to go off, and he doesn't like prosecutorial misconduct. Though in this scenario, in this dynamic, Flynn pretty much represented the government that he's not so, happy with. Isn't that interesting? But, he basically told the prosecutors, the defense, you get a do-over. And when you come back, let's see if the crimes that he's committed are balanced out by something more than the 19 meetings that Flynn had with Mueller's team. So I would say that the crimes that the judge had alluded to as being treasonous, meaning that it's so severe, I can't just let this guy walk. Go back and, do some more work, turn in some other people, you get out of my face. It seemed like the judge was quite peeved. And, of course, we know that there isn't a declared war, but I will maintain that if you wanted to parse it down a bit, what happens if war is declared on us and someone commits treason, but it can't be treason because our legislator has not declared a war? I don't know. I'm maybe being a bit too practical here, but if some nation state or entity has declared war on us, and someone aids and abets those people, I'm not talking like Lawrence said, oh, well, then, every Coca-Cola executive could be tried for treason for aiding and abetting Russia. Which, as an aside, I actually think that's a good idea. And can we get Pepsi in the indictment, too? I mean, come on. But, no, that's not the case. It's a little bit different because, I don't think Coca-Cola is maneuvering the levers of power to, pack the courts, make the nation awash with weaponry, disaffection, uncertainty, all promulgated by an aggressive and antagonistic nation state against us. Because tanks are crashing through our fields and our streets doesn't mean that there is not a war being declared on us and being fought right now. Asymmetrical war takes on many forms. That's why it's asymmetrical. They don't have to drive a tank down Pennsylvania Avenue. All they have to do is get some poorly educated people to believe their BS. And they got about a third of the people to do it. And since the vast majority of people are hunkered down just trying to make ends meet, this toxic portion of the population wields a lot more control than they should. And one thing Vlad and everybody else keeps forgetting is that when you wake up the sleeping giant, you're going to be in big trouble. Every time they, with the capital T, forget that. And they forget it at their own peril. And actually, that is what makes America great. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe, a West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, white supremacist groups are using an IRS loophole to make millions. I don't know why I'm reporting on this. They're getting kicked out of all the, like the PayPals and the Patreons and even their little standalone neo-Nazi funding platforms. They're getting kicked off of those too. So I don't want to give him any ideas, but it's there, and maybe we can close that loophole. Trump's School Safety Commission, I'm looking at you, Betsy, guts protections for students of color. She believes that the way to attack the proliferation of school shootings is to beat the black kids more because they've been getting coddled a little too much recently. I don't know how the two come together. I think it's with because there's bears that you got to protect yourself from too. So beat the black kid. And in a tale of two foundations, Steve Bannon wanted people to believe the best of times were the worst of times. Bannon. After the break, we then move to the chef's table, where a panel of 8 judges tossed out scores of misconduct claims against Brett Kavanaugh. Well, you know, and when we're talking about judicial misconduct, like when, you know, he interrupted and you know, all sorts of things, you know, like submitted maybe doctored documents. I'm serious. It's okay. He's on the Supreme Court now. Just throw them all out. And they did. Hey, Trump measures himself by the stock market, which we all know you can't use the stock market as a guide for how the rest of the economy is doing. But Trump does. And since he measures himself by the stock market, he ought to know that the stock market is on pace for the worst December since the Great Depression. And that would be over 80 years. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, to the rightish of the page is the chat room link, and that's a good way to engage us, so why don't you? Kelly Lincoln takes care of that, and thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the contribute button, and this is the holiday season and everybody's in a fund drive, so are we. If you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your recurring donation goes a long way. A recurring donation of any size, even a monthly coffee. If you bought us a coffee a month, that goes so far for us. And if you would, we would be greatly appreciated indeed. So thank you for your generosity. We are unable to do this without you. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Thank you, Tom, for taking care of that. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam, and I take care of Justice Putnam. Don't you know? And I also post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime, where I can be found as Justice Putnam. My real name, not made up, except, well, it was a given name and a family name passed down through generations. Isn't that odd? Okay, you can follow you can follow West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on Twitter at Cookbook West. Of course, all of our entities here are on Facebook in one fashion or another. But, you know, you got Zuckerberg, you know, floating a trial balloon for a run in 2020 for Prez, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, you have Zuckerberg and Facebook giving special clients access to Facebook users' direct messages. And as I keep saying, it's all because not one of them took a humanities class. Not one. Okay, so Facebook is as it is. You can pick up podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, etc., etc., etc. Gosh, we're even on Tumblr. What's happened to Tumblr? They got rid of all the smut. I don't know. Maybe it's okay for us to be there now. Try to find us among all the smut. You put in smut, and we're way down on the list, and not just because our name starts with W, though that might be part of it. Okay, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by Casey Michelle out of Think Progress. White supremacist organizations are facing new financial constraints as payment processors, online stores, and fundraising sites increasingly bow to public pressure and prohibit these groups and individuals from making money off of their racist vitriol. In other words, the market speaks, and sometimes it yells. For at least 7 organizations, however, a workaround remains: registering as a tax-exempt charity. Wow. As these white supremacists have discovered, taking advantage of a particular loophole enables them to continue earning millions of dollars in revenue from supporters happy to avoid taxes. Well. I think it's the melding of the perfect world for them now, isn't it? This registration has been a lifesaver for these organizations, including some of the most prominent groups currently leading the resurgence of white supremacy in the United States. Not according to certain right-wing leaders that have their hands on the levers of power. Oh, no. You better not tell us anything bad about white supremacy, because we're making this country white supremacist again. Groups like VDARE Foundation, New Century Foundation, and Charles Martel Society, all of which consistently produce white nationalist material, claim to be educational pursuits. Well, they are, stating that they exist simply to pass along information and little more. Even when these groups mention race in their tax filings, they still claim to serve educational purposes. As the New Century Foundation wrote on its tax forms, it exists to educate the public on matters of race relations, and immigration. Wow. They're just an educational society teaching people how to build the gulags that you're going to put all of the race relations and immigration people in. Aha. Characterizing themselves as educational institutions allows these organizations to claim tax-exempt status. Boy, that's what we should have done. Damn it. And it's been a boom for their finances, all told. The combined revenue of these 7 groups identified by Think Progress has reached more than $10 million since the mid-2000s. With over $5 million coming in the past 2 years alone. Could it be coming in from our own, racist white industrialists? Or is there a white utopia in the Siberian steppes somewhere that we might be getting money from? And thanks to a combination of political cowardice and shrinking budgets, the IRS has been unable or unwilling to do anything about it. As such, these white supremacist groups are able to advertise their status to their followers, promising that donations can be deducted from supporters' final taxes. These groups, especially white nationalist groups, have been using charity structures where they can for a long time. Heidi Byrick, who leads the Southern Poverty Law Center's intelligence project, told Think Progress. They're kind of savvy on this. Yeah, I bet. Few experts and academics have paid as close attention to the tax loopholes available to some white supremacist organizations as Eric Franklin Aramonte, an assistant professor at the University of Tennessee College of Law. Last year, Amarante examined the pattern of white supremacist groups gathering under this tax-exempt umbrella in a journal for the Emory Law Journal Online, entitled appropriately enough, "Why Don't Some White Supremacist Groups Pay Taxes?" He found several key factors that combined to create the gaping loophole. The answer is a complicated mix of absurdly broad Treasury regulations, unconstitutionally vague tests, and budgetary constraints. Well, the only way that fascism really could ever take over the country is if you starved the government of funds enough until it shrunk to the size where you could drown it in a bathtub. Casey Quinlan of Think Progress brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. The Trump administration is using the tragedy of school shootings to justify the rollback of Obama-era guidance that addresses disproportionate discipline of students of color and students with disabilities. The administration's Federal Commission on School Safety, which was formed after the shooting at Florida School in February, released a report yesterday that recommended rolling back policies that discourage school officers from beating the crap out of kids for minor disruptions and push for more positive and less punitive responses to student behavior. The report argued that these policies actually create more dangerous schools. By not beating the crap out of the disabled kids and the kids of color, the schools are much more dangerous. And that's why we have these terrible shootings. The report mentions severe acts such as rape, a stabbing, and assault of a teacher to justify rescinding the 2014 guidance, despite the fact that the guidance focused on minor infractions. Now, it's sort of disturbing that the response and their examples in passing fail to show it has something to do with violent acts. And this was director of the Center for Civil Rights Remedies with the University of Cal at L.A., Los Angeles, Daniel Lawson said, all the violence in the 2014 guidance, which is the Obama-issued order, is about corporal punishment, which is violence against children, and truancy violations, and tardiness, those sorts of things. So instead, Betsy DeVos and her group say, we got to beat some kids. Look, we're putting foreigners coming to our border in gulags, icebox baby gulags. You can't stop us from beating our own kids now, can you? Of Alternate brings us this final offering here at the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We're going a little bit over here in the first part, but that's okay. We can do that here. It's West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, nobody ought to be surprised to hear of the belated demise of Donald J. Trump Foundation, a racketeering enterprise under investigation by the state authorities in New York for the past 2 years. Barbara Underwood, the state attorney general, announced that the foundation will dissolve and its assets distributed to bona fide charitable groups. She seeks to prohibit its overseers Trump and his adult children from serving on the board of any nonprofit in New York for the foreseeable future. Well, he can go live in Moscow Tower. They've already got a signed agreement for it. Raking through the foundation's records since 2016, Underwood found what she described as a, quote, shocking pattern of illegality, which included not only various self-serving schemes to bolster Trump businesses and stroke Trump's ego, but also multiple and unlawful expenditures to advance his presidential campaign. The largest donation went to restore a fountain outside the Plaza Hotel in New York when Trump owned it. The smallest went to the Boy Scouts and appeared to be Donald Trump Jr.'s enrollment fee. What a cheapo. Of course, I must say, these have all been in the public domain. We heard about these through Farenthold already. But now the state attorney general has them. Trump misused the assets of one scam, the Trump Foundation, to protect another, Trump University. He sent a $25,000 foundation check to Florida Attorney General Pamela Bondi, an illegal donation, by the way, around the time she was considering whether to open a fraud probe into his fake educational institution. And she got the $25,000. She dropped the case. I would say she got bought off cheap. She should have held out for, $130. I thought that was the going rate. He raised millions for a veterans charity and then let Corey Lewandowski direct the distribution of those funds in Iowa on the eve of the 2016 Republican caucuses. And, of course, that violated the law, too. But remember the chants about lock her up? Well, a different foundation continues to operate in New York City with the highest possible ratings from nonprofit watchdog agencies like GuideStar, Charity Navigator, and Charity Watch. Over the past decade or so, that foundation is estimated by public health authorities to have saved the lives of millions of people around the world threatened by HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and other diseases. And it has an estimable programs that help farmers, workers, women, and school children around the world, including the United States. That foundation bears the names of Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton, none of whom have ever been sanctioned for a misuse of foundation funds. Yet the sorry fact is that despite the Clinton Foundation's extensive good works, many, perhaps most Americans probably believe that it is no better than Trump's fountain of sleaze. The negative image is owed to a carefully crafted and heavily funded plan to defame the Clinton Foundation, run by none other than Steve Bannon. Using funds supplied by the right-wing billionaire Mercer family, Bannon oversaw the production of a highly inaccurate book, Clinton Cash, which he then used to manipulate mainstream news outlets. The book author even made a deal with the New York Times to feature the book's research in a front-page story that suggested Hillary Clinton had engineered approval of a uranium sale to Russia for the benefit of foundation owners or donors. That false and cynical story ran in 2015, around the time that Clinton declared her presidential candidacy, and it molded a damaging narrative that influenced all ensuing coverage, just as Bannon and Mercer had plotted. From that moment until November of 2016, news coverage of the Clinton Foundation mainly consisted of snuffling around for gossip, stolen emails, and any other stray nonsense that advanced a negative story. Coverage of the Clinton Foundation's actual achievements was pushed aside. The Trump Foundation escaped such harsh scrutiny until just 6 weeks before Election Day of 2016, when the Washington Post published the most devastating articles in a series by David Farenthold. His outstanding investigations eventually set the stage for the Trump Foundation's exposure and disillusion by New York authorities, but most of Farenthold's toughest stories came far too late for any political impact and received far too little coverage in mainstream outlets. We saw him on Rachel. We saw him on a lot of the other shows, Lawrence. Well, Brad Parscale, the Trump aide who was already managing Trump's re-election campaign for 2020, had bamboozled voters with a wildly bogus comparison. As summarized in this June 2016 tweet, data doesn't lie. Clinton Foundation was slush fund while Hillary was senator, secretary, press candidate. Trump Foundation helped people in need with 100% to charities, but real Donald Trump voluntarily shuts his down. Yet who is the sleazy New York AG suing? Well, Parscale earned 4 Pinocchios from the Post fact-checker for this crude deception, but he got the last laugh. Voters can depend on Parscale and Trump to slander their opponent in 2020, just as they lied viciously and incessantly about the Clintons. The question is whether mainstream news outlets will again amplify such lies in the name of balance or defend truth against its enemies. And since this is not my first rodeo, I think the answer would be yeah, they're going to do that again, especially if a Clinton is involved. All right, let's get to our break. And when we come back, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. This week, a royal bizarre love triangle. The Favorite is such a surreal, farcical tale that one could be excused for thinking that it is a work of fiction. However, it's actually drawn from true events, specifically from an obscure part of history when, in 1711, Britain's Queen Anne, the last of the Stuart monarchs, named Abigail Hill as keeper of the privy purse, thus replacing her successor, Sarah Churchill, as her favorite, both politically and personally. Despite its historical roots, The Favorite is very much a modern tale about women in power and the lengths to which they'll go to acquire and maintain it. It also shows how ephemeral power can be in such circumstances. No character embodies this aspect more than that of Abigail, played by a brilliant Emma Stone, who has recently seen a reversal of fortunes and has come to her cousin Sarah for help. Despite the kinship, Sarah has neither the desire nor the time to help, since she's preoccupied being the lover and confidant of Queen Anne. Anne is played by an almost certain to be nominated Olivia Colman and is at best a pathetic character. Childless, partly mad, and suffering from a variety of physical afflictions, Anne is at once both repulsive and sympathetic. As someone who has lost over a dozen children through miscarriage, she channels her maternal instincts to a menagerie of pets and lovers of both sexes. Although being the Queen's favorite is desirable, she is the monarch. Being so is never a smooth ride. Rachel Weisz is both funny and clever as Sarah, although Coleman and Stone steal the show. Much like another movie, Highlander, there can only be one favorite, and the action of these two women vying for the position will likely have the favorite audiences switching allegiances until the credits roll. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Kim Lowe. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is an important message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. When it snows this winter, make sure you clear more than your driveway. Before you hit the road and before you get in the driver's seat, check to be sure that your vehicle's tailpipe is clear of snow. If the tailpipe is blocked, carbon monoxide, an odorless, colorless, and deadly gas produced by your engine can build up quickly inside your vehicle, poisoning anyone inside. To learn more, call 1-800-CDC-INFO. That's 1-800-232-4636.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Fake news is real news.
I'm Baratunde Thurston from The Onion, and also, mother. You're listening to the Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
In this sense, until recently, few people would have referred to the mainstream media as, quote, fake news. Sure, people had different views about different networks and anchors, but on the whole, news gathering and reporting prior to the ascendancy of Breitbart and Fox and Trump was a highly regarded profession, and journalists were respected. That's changed. Trump and authoritarian governments around the world have branded facts as fake news if the reporting does not toe the party line and support the government. The rebranding of the First Amendment in America and its effects around the world is ingenious public relations that is also deeply disturbing and highly dangerous. As Shaheen Pasha, a journalism professor at the University of Massachusetts, recently wrote, quote, countries accused of genocide and unspeakable violence against their own people are using the concept of fake news made popular by this U.S. administration to mask their atrocities and punish the journalists trying to bring these horrific acts to light. That should trouble us as Americans. Indeed, it should.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
With a rare bipartisan 87-12 vote, the Senate on Tuesday passed the First Step Act, a package of criminal justice reforms that could reduce the U.S. prison population, currently the largest in the world.
Last night, the Senate passed it, what is the most significant changes on this issue in decades. The bill would make thousands of inmates immediately eligible for reduced sentences and early release programs as well. It would also give judges with more leeway on mandatory minimum sentences for nonviolent drug offenders. The bill followed a united push by conservatives, by liberals, by activists as well. It's now in the House's hands. It's likely the House will pass this, and the president has said he looks forward to signing it.
It was a day of drama inside a D.C. federal courtroom on Tuesday as things didn't go quite as expected when the judge lambasted Michael Flynn before delaying the sentencing of Donald Trump's former national security advisor for lying to the FBI.
Both sides suggested to the judge that 0 jail time would be appropriate for Michael Flynn, but instead both sides ran into a blowtorch of concern from the judge, Emmett Sullivan. The judge said it's a very serious offense for someone who is a senior White House official to lie to the FBI in the Justice Department. And then the judge strongly signaled that he was not ready to accept their recommendation and might well impose prison time based on Flynn's conduct. At one point, he even asked Mueller's prosecutors if they had ever considered charging Flynn with treason. He asked for a break to give the lawyers for Flynn a chance to decide whether they wanted to delay based on the judge's strong warnings that he might impose prison time. And after about 20 minutes, they came back and said, okay, Your Honor, we want to take you up on your offer to delay. The judge also said when the court hearing reconvened here that he didn't mean to imply that Michael Flynn had committed treason. He just said he wanted to know whether the government ever considered charging that.
More troubles for Trump surfaced on Tuesday as the Trump Foundation, Donald Trump's so-called personal charitable foundation, has agreed to dissolve under judicial supervision amid an ongoing lawsuit concerning its finances.
President Trump has agreed to shut down the Trump Foundation, and this news coming in the middle of an ongoing lawsuit against the foundation from New York State AG's office. They allege that rather than being a real charity, the Trump Foundation has been more of a checkbook serving President Trump's own interests. Here's just a couple of examples from the lawsuit of how the organization appears to have used its donations to benefit Trump or his business. First off, it says Trump bought a 6-foot portrait of himself at a charity auction using charity money. The lawsuit also says $100,000 of charity money was used to settle legal claims against Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort in Florida. And similarly, the lawsuit also says another $158,000 of charity money was used to settle legal claims against the Trump National Golf Club in 2008. Now, let me also read a part of a statement from New York Attorney General Barbara Underwood. She said, "Our petition detailed a shocking pattern of illegality involving the Trump Foundation, including unlawful coordination with the Trump presidential campaign, repeated and willful self-dealing, and much more. This amounted to the Trump Foundation functioning as little more than a checkbook to serve Mr. Trump's business and political interests." Now, the AG's office also says it will review which charities will receive the remainder of the Trump Foundation's assets.
Trump linked. The White House appears to be moving away from forcing a government shutdown over funding for Trump's promised border wall, with Press Secretary Sarah Sanders saying there are, quote, other ways to secure the $5 billion in funding the president demands. At her only White House press briefing this month, Sarah Sanders tried to explain where the money would come from.
The deficit ballooning to over $1 trillion under this president. Where are the additional monies for this wall going to come from, and why is he asking the American taxpayer for them when he promised Mexico was going to pay?
Look, we're not asking American taxpayers for that. We are looking at existing funding through other agencies right now that we can draw on to do that immediately. So the president's been clear. The president has been clear that the USMCA deal would provide additional revenue through that deal that would show that Mexico is paying for the wall.
The Treasury, though, the trade benefits, if there are any, don't go to the Treasury.
He's saying that the revenue provided and the money that would be saved through the USMCA deal, we could pay for the wall 4 times over. And by doing that new trade deal, we have the opportunity to pay for the wall.
But trade benefits go to private citizens. They don't go to the United States Treasury.
He's talking about the general revenue that comes from that.
So you're going to tax...
No, we're not taxing. We're talking about additional revenue that wouldn't have existed without the president getting a new deal.
Have you done the math on that?
There have been a number of things that we've looked at in which we know we'll have additional revenue that comes in through the USMCA.
From the USMCA into the Treasury?
We think there will be more than that comes in.
The Justice Department has amended the regulations of the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives to clarify that bump stock type devices are machine guns and are illegal. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From UN headquarters in New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 minutes. Mass protests are continuing in Hungary after President Viktor Orban okayed a labor law making it legal to force employees to work as many as 400 hours of overtime each year. But as protests continue, popular anger is being directed more broadly at the many ways Orban changed Hungary since sweeping into power in 2010. A new 2012 constitution forced judges into early retirement, reined in a nagging constitutional court, and required all electoral campaigning to be carried out on state media. Since then, Hungary's slide away from liberal democracy has only continued.
Political scientists who study these things, no one would consider Hungary anymore a democracy. It's what's categorized as a competitive authoritarian regime.
R. Daniel Kellerman is a professor of political science and law at Rutgers University.
It's not a North Korea-style dictatorship. It's something more along the lines of maybe a soft version of Russia, where they have elections, but the elections are rigged in favor of the ruling party. The media is completely controlled. And now with these final steps, what had remained of some judicial independence is being put under government control.
But for all that backsliding, Hungary still receives billions in annual EU aid, and Orban's ruling party sits with Angela Merkel's Christian Democrats at the European Parliament.
So long as there was no violence, so long as his kind of authoritarian system was a sort of legalistic one, they shut down newspapers instead of arresting journalists. They rigged elections instead of physically intimidating opposition politicians. As long as it was like that, then the EU didn't do anything. The European People's Party really didn't do anything.
As Hungarian police start using violence to subdue protests, the EU and the world are starting to take note. The question is, after being asleep as Orban hollowed out the Hungarian state, does it even matter that they're awake? Luke Vargas, The United Nations.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River, in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 44 degrees Fahrenheit, and according to the Weather Underground, it even feels like 44 degrees Fahrenheit. I like that. I like how it is and how it feels. And it looks like right now winds are light and variable out of the north-northeast. Will continue such throughout the day and throughout the night until, well, actually throughout the day until tonight. And where they will then shift out of the southeast at 5 to 10 miles per hour, bringing some more rain for tomorrow. Right now, the forecast for the high, the daytime high, is at 56 degrees with overnight low of 38. And then tomorrow we're expecting a high of 50 with about a half an inch or more of rain. And we'll take that. Though it looks like with that overnight low tomorrow night in the mid-30s, we do have a possibility of snow coming around Christmas time. So we'll see how that works out. Right now, pollen is rated as none. The air quality index is in the good range at 34 parts per million, up a bit from yesterday. And the daytime UV index is rated low at 1. Visibility is down to 5 miles. And, that barometric pressure is falling at 30.29 inches with visibility down to 5 miles. And relative humidity is at 94%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 48 degrees and partly cloudy. Paris is 49 degrees and mostly cloudy. Rome is 52 degrees and fair, except I don't know how fair it is when they have a wind advisory for a potential disruption of their power grid due to wind. How fair is that? Well, it's fair to them, I suppose. And that's Rome for you. Kiev is 20 degrees and cloudy. Kabul is 28 and clear. Hong Kong, 66 degrees with a rain shower. Tokyo is 44 and clear. Sydney, Australia is 72 degrees and partly cloudy. You know they are moving into their summer down there. San Francisco, California is 55 degrees Fahrenheit with a high surf advisory continuing. Do not turn your back on the ocean. Never, ever, ever do that. And New York, New York is a chilly and crisp 33 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted. These purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Chung of Reuters brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Scores of complaints accusing U.S. Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh of improperly conducting himself during his contentious Senate confirmation process have been thrown out by a panel of 8. Count them, 8 federal judges. The judges said the complaints of misconduct, including accusations that Kavanaugh made false, unduly partisan, and disrespectful statements to senators, must be dismissed because he has been confirmed to the Supreme Court, and the federal law governing judicial conduct applies only to lower court judges, not the Supreme Court. Once you're there, you are now poet, philosopher, king, and you are beyond reproach. We'll see about that. Kavanaugh was a federal appeals court judge when Trump appointed him in July. He was confirmed in October. In all, 83 complaints were filed against Kavanaugh. 83. But they're all thrown out because, hey, they won.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
And Desai Martin of Share Blue Media brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Even though the stock market is not a good proxy for the overall health of the U.S. economy, Trump has spent 2 years using it as a proxy for his own success. He's tweeted about stocks or the stock market more than 70 times, usually giving himself outsized credit for any positive news at all. In just 1 month, October of 2017, Trump bragged about the stock market 9 times. But now, Trump's favorite indicator of his own success is on pace for the worst December since the Great Depression. 2 major stock indexes, the Dow Jones and the S&P 500, are on pace for the worst December performance since 1931, when stocks were battered during the Great Depression. Merry, savage Christmas. The stock market is tanking despite promises from Trump and Republicans that their scam to cut the taxes for the rich would have the exact opposite effect. You know, like when you bounce a ball, it just stays on the ground and doesn't bounce back up. That's what they were promising. A month after the tax law was signed into law, the S&P 500 is down just over 1%. Former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan recently told an audience that the stock market boom Trump used to brag about is coming to an end and investors should run for cover. Well, that's not anything veiled. He usually veils those types of advice. Well, Trump, of course, never publicly admits regret. But now that news outlets are starting to compare the stock market to the Great Depression, Trump might suddenly stop bragging so much about it and, in this reporter's opinion, blame it on Hillary and Obama. Oh, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day. And you know that Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We'll meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, and do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.